matchup. Canada-Latvia, I'm going to take Canada 11-0 as well. You know, it might be 8, it might be 6. I'd expect Canada to win this game at the very least. Latvia, not really expected to contend with Canada in this tournament, but of course, crazier things have happened. Hello everyone, welcome back to On the Fly. Today we're recapping day 2 of the World Junior Championships happening in Ottawa, Ontario. So we'll hop right into it today, starting with the scores from today's games. We'll start here with the first game. No. We're gonna rip this one off. You know what? Let's just rip this off. We're gonna rip it off like a Band-Aid. So Canada played Latvia tonight. Yes, Latvia. The team that was in Division 1A a couple of years ago, recently promoted, playing the powerhouse in Canada, on home ice, you know, after a tough loss last year in the quarterfinals to Czechia. 2 years before that, they won gold both years. You know, seemingly, as one would expect, a blowout, right? For Canada, right? No. What we instead watched was an absolute abomination of the Canadian junior national team. A team that, despite doing the same thing over and over again, let's just do it one more time, right? Because that's, if nothing, the definition of insanity. And I feel like at this point, you know, it just gets to a point where it's, come on, guys, let's go. You see that the Latvian team is playing for overtime, right? Or they're playing to try and kill out the clock as long as possible. So why take penalties? Why push the puck towards them? Why give them the opportunity to take the middle of the ice, work around the outside, do perimeter work like you're so good at, and find opportunities? You don't have to force every single thing. We saw this yesterday with the U.S. against Germany. And oh God, the U.S. plays them tomorrow. And we're going to watch the U.S. pummel the living daylights out of Team Latvia. And it's going to be scary. And oh my God. Anyway, back to the Canada. You know, you play the same thing, right? You take penalties, 6 of them in this game, 2 of which got scored on, 1 of which was towards the end of the game, a delay or a too many men on the ice call at that point, right? So the question becomes, right, what's next for this Canadian team? Oh, and one more thing that I completely forgot to mention. Matthew Schaefer, one of the best defense on Canada's team, probably out for the tournament with injury. We don't know his status yet because, of course, the Canadian coach has other things to worry about aside from one of his best defensemen being injured, considering they just lost a game to Latvia in the World Juniors on home ice in front of a home crowd. Okay. Congrats to Latvia. First time they beat Canada in history. You know, we look back at the recent results of these two teams. What do we see? Canada beating them by 10 goals in more than half of their games. My point is rested. Congrats to Latvia. Earned their win every step of the way tonight. Played the exact game they needed to. And that's the problem with this trap style defense, right? Is they hog the middle of the ice, wait for Canada to make mistakes. And Canada made a lot of mistakes tonight. And I know I talked about the U.S. yesterday and how they were going to be in trouble. Canada tonight is even worse than the U.S. in my opinion here. So with all that being said, we will move it along here back to where we should be with the first game of the day. And it was a really good game today between Slovakia and Switzerland. And this game, as we sort of talked about yesterday in the recap video and sort of the previewing of today's games, you know, these are two teams very equal in both their talent, the way they play, you know, their skill. But at the end of the day, the Slovakians, in my eyes, just had that extra little touch. And we saw that today, you know, little attentions to details here and there. You know, the game-winning goal for Slovakia, and this one was just a missed pass from behind their own net for the Swiss, and it ended up in the back of their net. And that's sort of those key little details for me that in my eyes, the Slovakians just have that little bit of a more fine tune, where the Swiss a little bit more free. They play sort of the way that they want. But, you know, at the same time, 2-1 is your final in this one. And it really could have went either way. You know, Urban played great for Slovakia in this one. And it was one of those games that, you know, could have gone either way right up to the very end. The last goal I think was scored with just under 4 minutes to play. But at the end of the day, Slovakia takes this one 2-1, picks up a big 3 points in the standings. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit here, because today we got a little bit of work to do with the standings, considering Canada lost in a shootout to Latvia. But a big 3 points for Slovakia in this one. And not too much else to say here, because, this was just one of the better games we're going to see at this tournament, right up there with the other games from today, which I think surprised a lot of people here. But nonetheless, okay, moving along here before I go back into my Canada rant, because we could do that one all night, but there are other games to talk about, like this one, like Finland versus Germany. Which, if we're talking about upsets, in my eyes was another one. We think back to yesterday with Germany and the US, where Germany held them very close right up until the very end. And, it was one of those games that was really shocking to me for the US, just how poorly they played. Very similar to Canada today, where, they tried to force everything to the middle of the ice. Of course, the Germans are going to pick those pucks off, work the other way, similar to Latvia today. But the Germans played a great game today. Two teams, Germany and Finland, both play the trap-style defense like you sort of expect from these European countries. But the one problem when you have two teams playing the same style of hockey is it becomes very defensive hockey. And we saw that today, a lot of pucks sort of around the boards, playing that sort of big body, throw around the weight a little bit, down below the corners. That's what you're sort of seeing with these two teams. And that's really indicative of why the score was so tight today. 3-1 rather was the final. The empty net for the Finns sealed it. But, at the same time, very tight game between these two teams, right up until the very end. And it really could have went either way. The Germans, unfortunately, just fell short. And that was the first upset watch we had of today. And, of course, it ended with another one. But Slovakia, in my eyes, was the favorites, just according to the way I looked at it. So I'm not really considering that one to be an upset, but I know for many people, a lot of people had the Swiss. So in that sense, I guess it was two upsets today. But in my eyes, Slovakia was never the underdog in this one. In my eyes, they were always the favorite. So that's why I'm not necessarily taking them as the more or less the upset. But the German game, to me, was one that really turned my eyes. And I think Germany is a team that is going to do some pretty interesting stuff at this tournament. And it's scary to see, especially because, the rest of this Group A is really up for grabs now, with Canada losing one in overtime. You have Finland sort of in the mix there, with who knows what they do next, whether the US is a target. Latvia with an overtime win is a big deal for them. Germany sort of just kicking around as long as they can. We'll be curious to see. They'll obviously play Latvia at some point on the 30th. And then, of course, the last game, which we'll see in a couple days. And I'm interested to see against Canada what happens. Because, if Germany can beat Canada, which a couple days ago I would have called you crazy, we're at that point now, right? And I think that's sort of the scary thing, is you never really know with this tournament what's coming next now. And, today's a prime example of that. I think every single person, including myself, you saw it in the intro, wrote off Latvia today. And sure enough, 3-2 in a shootout for Latvia over Canada. Gotta love it. Moving on to the third game of today. Which there isn't too much to talk about here. Kazakhstan did get a goal today. 8-1 was your final for Sweden. One thing I will say is Sweden did not look that great in this game. Similar to sort of what we saw with Canada today, that they just weren't really on their game. Sure, Latvian goalie did stay on his head, so you have to give him that. But at the same time, similar to Sweden, if you're gonna play the game to win. And unfortunately, you didn't see a lot of that today. Yes, 8-1. Sure, you want to say 8-1, but this game should have been by a lot more of a margin. Probably shouldn't have allowed a goal. So, in the grand scheme of things, yes, it's a win. It's 3 points in the register. It's a 7-point goal differential from today. But in my eyes, it could have been done a very different way. And I think the Swedes, if looking back on it now, would have rather performed it a different way. But nonetheless, here, we'll move along now to the news from today, starting with cheese for the Swiss. ×2. Remember yesterday we had the exact same thing. Today, yet again, another tight loss. And obviously yesterday wasn't quite the tight loss, but it felt like that sort of tight loss that So the Swiss were really in the entire game, and similar to today, just one little miss up was the difference between a win and a loss for the Swiss in this game. So definitely interesting there. Second one today is the Urban Power. The Slovaks have got their goalie back. We saw him yesterday play against the Swedes on short rest today against the Swiss, and he played great yet again. So another key sort of thing for the Slovaks is how well their goaltending plays. Think back to the last couple of years with Adam Gajan and Simon Lax, a couple of years before that. That's the key to Slovakia's success in these tournaments, is how well the goaltending plays, and that's been sort of that driving factor for all these really well-performing Slovak teams. In my eyes, Urban has been nothing short of the same, and I think when we look at sort of what they need to do to upset teams like the Czechs, that's going to be a key. Think to their first round matchup, which right now, I don't know. Is it going to be Canada? Is it going to be Finland? Is it going to be the US? Right? Who's going to end up being that second spot in Group A? I think right now it really is up for grabs. But it will be interesting to see, of course, because, Latvia plays the US tomorrow. Canada plays the US on the 31st. So those two games, likely, assuming the US takes them both, should be interesting. Latvia ends up playing Germany. In theory, right, Canada might not be that second spot. So, I don't know. They messed everything up today. I don't know what to tell you guys. I don't know. I have no answers. I have nothing. Canada was supposed to win this game by a blowout, and they didn't. So, it's one of those days. We'll flip it over. Or no, I guess we're going to have to go through the rest of the news because there's more games today than just Canada losing to Latvia. Finland, adversity. Of course, that's the key for Finland in today's game. They faced a tough team in the Germans, and they play very similar styles. And luckily for the Finns, up to the task. We saw them sort of work through it. We saw them have a tough game yesterday against Canada. And so today, again, another tough matchup. And they once again took this game 3-1, which was of course a good thing. 3 points, a win in the column. So for the Finns, good news for them. They face a little bit of adversity. You always need that going into it. Probably a tough playoff round, which looks like it'll be the Czechs. Of course, time will tell there. And then the other one from today for momentum. For Germany, they have played really well these last couple days, and I hope it'll continue. I know they play Canada coming up, so a little bit scary there. But I guess time will tell. Good enough for the Swedes. They played a decent enough game. They got the 3 points. What more could you ask for? Could have played a little bit better, sure, but it's good enough. It's a win. A win's a win. For the Kazakhs, they got one. They did score a goal today. And so there's that. For Canada, yep. And for Latvia, history, they did beat Canada for the first time today, so congrats to them. Move it over now to the standings, and this is where it kind of gets a little bit funky. So Canada in first place, 1 regulation win, 1 overtime loss. For 4 points, the US with 1 regulation win, 3 points. Finland with 1 regulation loss, 1 regulation win. They're in 3 points. And then Latvia with 1 overtime win with 2 points. Germany with 2 regulation losses with 0 points in that relegation spot. Flipping over now to Group B with Sweden with 2 regulation wins, 6 points. First place, Czechia second, Slovaks third, Kazakhstan fourth, Switzerland fifth with the Czechs 1 win. Slovaks 1 win, 1 loss, 3 points as well. And then Kazakhstan, 1 regulation loss. The Swiss with 2 regulation losses. So it's going to be interesting, right? Because there are a couple different scenarios we see, right? The U.S. Still has to play both Latvia and Canada. Germany still has to play Canada and Latvia. So, there is still that to go. Latvia still has to play Finland. So, in theory, and just work with me here, if we're looking at the standings, right, Latvia very well could be the second spot if they can beat Finland and they can beat Germany, and then the U.S. really doesn't matter, right? Because assuming the U.S. beats Canada and Latvia, right, we got ourselves a situation here, but we'll take a look more in depth on that closer to the end of the standings, because it will be interesting, because really it could go any way from here. That Canada loss today throws a wrench into the Group A standings, and I will be very interested to see sort of what goes on there, if there's any sort of fallback from that from that whole loss. But we'll move it here now to the schedule for tomorrow's games. 2 on the slate, and I mean, yeah, I'm looking at the games. I want to say it. I really want to say it, like really badly. Czechs, Kazakhstan, 1 o'clock p.m. Latvia, USA, 3:30 p.m. Do I say it? I think I say it. I think I say it's going to be another blowout for the US and for the Czechs. And if I'm wrong, and I can accept that, but I have to work logically, and I don't know how to work around the fact that those games should be blowouts, and anything short of that, in my eyes, just doesn't make sense. So I'm going to take them both for blowouts. I think the Czechs are going to win by a lot. I think the US is going to win by a lot. And hopefully come back tomorrow and watch as Latvia beats the US or Kazakhstan beats Czechia. If that happens, just please come back here, because I will not, it's just, my brain will malfunction and it's going to short circuit. It'll be very funny tomorrow, and hopefully I'll cool down from the Canada loss, so be sure to come back tomorrow. But we will now flip over to the, we threw out a poll on the Twitter page, which is on the fly 1515, asking people for their thoughts today. And we'll start here with one from Kenny Kaminsky, good friend of the channel. And be sure to follow him on Twitter for all your Province Bruins stuff, who just says one word simply, his thoughts on today: crazy. And I mean, it's crazy, right? It was, in my eyes, one of the better games we've seen in that Finland-Germany game. In my eyes, that Slovak-Swiss game was a crazy game too. Finland-Germany was crazy. Kazakhstan-Sweden, it was a write-off. And then Latvia beating Canada. And I think those 3 games alone were crazy, and I completely agree with him on that one. It was a crazy game, and of course, that's what we get. That's the joy of the World Juniors. It never is decided. It's always going to come down to who plays their game at the right time, at the right moment. Fortunately for Canada today, it did not happen. Unfortunately for Germany today, could not close it out. And unfortunately for the Swiss, they made one bad pass. Moving on now to the second comment from Kicking with Kipes, great YouTube channel. Be sure to check him out. Who says they could use a Yakimchuk or Perek on that power play A. Dreadful, and no Seneca is brutal. I completely agree. We talked about it in our preview video for Team Canada coming into this tournament. What were they going to be able to do here? Why were there certain names left off the list? And you're starting to see the problem with that. I mean, I found out that, of course, it was a power play goal, the late one for Canada, so they kind of ruined that whole talking point of the video. But their power play tonight was awful, like awful, like to the point where it's like, are you guys actually on the power play? Like their first goal, which was looking like it was going to be the only goal of the game, was a shorthanded goal. And it looked like their shorthanded offensive ability was better than their actual power play ability on the offense side. But, obviously the power play is something that you need to be having, and it needs to be working. It's been a big problem for Canada over the last few years. Especially at this tournament. And, is it great? No. Is it able to be improved upon? Probably. And hopefully they can figure that out throughout this tournament. And then the last one from today is from Nick, the double IHF fan. He's a great follow on Twitter. Be sure to check him out. Who says, personally for me, this loss isn't worth getting upset over. Latvia's been knocking on the door for years, from beating Czechia to make the quarterfinals in 2022 to losing to Sweden by 1 goal in that quarterfinal. It was only a matter of time before they got a win over Canada. Plus, hopefully, this will remind Canadian fans that no game at this tournament is ever easy. An upset happens just about every year now. And the second part, he says, it will put an end to the World Junior Classic field needs to be reduced argument that we likely would have seen if Canada won in a blowout. And yes, that's a fair comment. But at the same time, it still doesn't excuse the fact that Canada lost to Latvia today, right? And in my eyes, my problem doesn't arise with the fact that they lost. It's how they lost. And the fact that, you can do the same thing over and over and over again, but if you don't change it and it still doesn't work and you're going to keep doing the exact same thing, you're going to make me go insane. And I'm sure you're going insane just watching these games. And it's the way they lose these games is what bothers me the most. And I know, as much as it sucks that, and as much as Latvia deserved the win today, right? Their goalie played outstanding. One of the biggest reasons why they're in that game to start. Come on, right? Like, it still should have been a blowout. And I mean, what more can I say? And I think I've probably said it about 100 times in this video today. So I probably need to cut this short. So we will. So thank you all for watching. If you made it this far. Thank you. If you liked it, drop a like. If you really liked it, if you're subscribing, tell all your friends and comment down below your thoughts on day 2 of the World Championship. Until next time, see you.